I have Shaun from Kiss Books here again. He's going to be teaching us how to sell some albums. Now, albums are one of those things that I've done in my business for the last few years. It's been such a massive, not just impact financially, because obviously you make some money selling albums, but my clients are so excited to get them. I've got one client who literally has shown it to every single person who goes to her door. I swear the UPS guy probably has them memorized at this point. Shaun's got his stack of albums behind him. I usually have mine over here, but I have a dog, so we hide those. What's going on, buddy?
I'm doing well. It's been an awesome day so far. I get to do a lot of this, and I just love doing this.
This is my favorite thing. It's probably like the lives and also just interviewing people like you and learning. It's always such it's just magical.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, let's get to
cool.
it.
Let's talk about albums. So as a former photographer yourself, because you shot weddings for years, what do you think? Like, what's the big benefit to selling albums?
Yeah, I did shoot a lot of weddings, and when it came down to it, I just like the entire industry thought what I was doing was what we're called. We're like service based, right? We're a photographer. We provide. I'm here to take pictures of you, and that's what I'm doing. And ultimately, that's what I did, and I did it really well. There's times where I struggled with my craft as well, but as I got
Yeah,
better, I was like, yeah, I'm good at this. And then I started to realize like when I delivered an album to them, like at their house and had them flip through it, it was 6 years into what I had been doing. But that's where I was like, man, maybe it's different than what I thought, because I could see like, oh, they're going to do this more than just this one time.
yeah,
And like, this is actually what I do is I'm causing moments like this for the future. And that's where I really started to shift my thoughts to where it's like, yeah, we call ourselves photographers, but part of the experience is in the final delivery of this album. And then maybe I could speak some life into that and just walk them through how and like how to have an album ultimately, because when we got to the digital world, it wasn't as expected as it was before. When it was film, we just did albums, like there's a certain age bracket, like my grandparents, they all had, and all their friends, they all had albums. Like if you go to any person's house, that was born back then, they had albums because it was film, and it was
mm,
just something that we did. It was part of the experience. And so I was like, I want to make this part of the experience again. Because when I
yeah,
first started shooting, I was film, not because I was like this creative, like film guy. It was like, there was no digital, when I first started shooting. And then when it became digital, I didn't change a whole lot about my workflow because it was already working. So I
yeah.
still printed everything, turned them into like 4x6 proofs, and then we picked for the album and did all those things. But digital did change some things. But as I saw photographers that started digital, like current ones that are like 2, 3, 4, 5 years into their business, they only have, they have film option, but that's like the high end, like uber creative photographers, and that gear is a lot harder to use than some of the current modern technology. And
Yeah.
so I was like, how can we show or make this a thing again, to where it's just like it is part of what we do. And so that's what I'm doing now. But even in my own business, it changed the way that I thought about what I did for a living. Because I talk about this a lot, but photographers instantly have this like magical purpose. Like, I get to
Mm,
stop time for you to look back on these photos. I say that a lot, but I
yeah.
believe it. And it is such a wonderful thing to start out with a purpose like that. Then we get to decide, like, how do we want them to actually view this? Do we want to put it on their wall, over their mantle, like somewhere?
Mm,
Um, but their story, especially like for a wedding, is like it needs more than just a photo of everybody that was in the wedding, or what, or the family, the new families on each side, or whatever it is that they put over their mantle. It's like, how do we tell their story? Because that's what we're doing. We're stopping time and telling their story with the camera, but we want them to just flip through it on their phone. I want them to have access to it on their phone because I want them to share it, and that's where referrals come from. But how can we make it to where they're excited about the album itself,
yeah.
because it costs more money, and it's more expensive if you have a photographer that has an album in it, then you end up spending more on the album. I understand a lot of those things, but it's like I got to a point deep into my career where somebody was referred by somebody else that they had looked at their album. They walked in and that's what they wanted to talk about. Can I see this album? Like, can we start to build my album? And they're just hiring me
Mm,
literally. And that's where it got really good, because I'm like, whoa, this is a lot easier than me doing these, like all the things that I talk about in the book that I wrote. It's
yeah.
like, no, those ones are super easy. And those started to come more and more, like, tell me about the album. And that was like this that's their story. And I just absolutely loved it. So it's been an awesome journey of learning, and I'm continuing to learn. That's why I love doing stuff like this, like what's working, what's not working. And then we get to kind of like shift and go again. That's what's fun about entrepreneurship, you know?
Yeah. So like as a client shift, I know this was like my big struggle when I first came in. I'd have clients that would come in and go like, why can't I just use my Instagram, Facebook, MySpace, whatever it was at the time? No one said MySpace.
Yeah.
But like, what's your response? Like, what are you going to go with? Like, okay, I don't need the album because I think I have this digital gallery of it. What do you say in that case?
Yeah. I had that a lot. Because I got to a point where one of the ways to serve all your clients with albums is to put them in every single one of the packages. So I
Yep.
had put an album in every single one of the packages, and it would say this value, like a $600 value, $1,000 value, depending on what package they were looking at, right? So like, can you just take the $600 off and charge me less, and then I'll go figure out the album myself, or I can just have it for social media and things like that. I would just say no, and this is why.
Yeah.
Because what I do for a living is, there's no doubt about it, I'm a photographer, so I'm there to serve you. We're going to create an experience, and I'm going to document it. And that, for so many photographers today, is what we do, right? For me, I deliver that in a story, and this is why. And this is where I either hired them. A lot of times I was like, it depended on what part of my career I was in, but there's times where we're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing us,
Hmm.
because there's some clients that I had to let go because I was like, this is just too much. We're not lined up enough, and this is going
Yeah.
to be a headache the entire time. But in that moment, I would say, because what I want for you is 3 years into your marriage, you take a moment before you go out to dinner to celebrate your anniversary, and you sit down and you flip through your album and remember what it was like on your wedding day. Because 3 years is a long time,
Yeah.
and you've been through a lot of things, but you can remember what it was like on your wedding day, that you could see the future in each other, and you're like, this year is an easy one to celebrate, but let's fast forward to the 6th year, and maybe you had a rough year, and some things changed, and maybe there's something that happened. You guys are arguing about finances or something like that. It's still a time that I want you to sit down on the couch and flip through it and remember what it was like to be on your wedding day, because I want you to look at each other this way again.
Hmm.
Because on your wedding day, it's probably better than you've ever looked before, maybe better than you ever will look. You're buying dinner for 200 of your friends. You're not going to probably do that again ever in your life. It's
Right.
clearly a special moment that people show up for, because they're committed to you just like you're committed to each other. Now, the odds are not in our favor when it comes to relationships. The marriage statistics and stuff are really not in our favor. So I want this to be a reminder of when you were committed to each other. Because even if you have a hard year, sometimes that's where the most growth can happen, because you learn a lot about each other, and sometimes you make recommitments to each other for that next season, year, however you want to measure that
Hmm.
time. It's like, sure, this year was rough, and tonight's not going to be like the biggest celebration of our best year ever, and the post on social media is probably going to be a little better than our year actually was. Welcome to social media. But what do we want next year? Are we going to settle and just call this good, or are we going to go and put something in front of us that, like, hey, let's fight for this again, to where we can get back to where we look at each other and we're like, we admire each other, and we are like, like infatuated with each other again? How can we rekindle this love that we have for each other, and just
Yeah.
slowing down and causing that is such a gift. And that was a game changer for me. I was like, that's what I'm in the business of relationships, and showing them what they're capable of for each other. I happen to have a camera, and that's a tool that I use to show them this.
Yeah, dude, I think that's so. I've mentioned it before in my consultations where it's like, listen, you're gonna have a day where you're in the middle of a fight, and you're gonna get to see this album, and then you're gonna look and go, that's right, that's why. It's like this is just like that little gist of this is who you are and this is where you came from to begin with, and that is magical. But I will say, a few times I've had this question. Okay, we have a wedding videographer coming, so we can just watch a wedding video. Now, I personally, I am not a big like I don't ship for wedding videos at this point because I used to make them, and I know like I'm just more attached to the photos. I like being surrounded by them. But like,
Yep.
what would you say to somebody who's going? Well, we have a wedding video coming, so we don't need a book.
Yep. Yeah. I got that question as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, I would say, like, photo and video a lot of times get put in kind of like the same boat. Like, they're creative visuals, they're going to deliver something about your story. But it's like reading a book versus watching the movie. Which one is usually better?
Mm.
It's reading a book, because when you look at a photograph, you have your version of the story. When you watch a video, your brain shuts down a lot more because it's doing all the work for you. It's like the movements there, the actual tone, and the way that they talk to each other is all there. When we're looking at a photo, we fill all that in. So it's
Mm.
based on our memory of that moment. And I would love to see a study of like, what do they think is happening? And what is this person? And they're both in the photo, but I guarantee you they think something totally different.
Yeah.
And even if you said, what do you think they're thinking? It would just blow my mind. But that's what I love about it. I love reading. I hardly watch TV anymore because it's gotten kind of boring, because I listen to books on Audible and I listen to it pretty fast, to where
Same.
sometimes I'm watching TV, I'm like, can you speed this up? Like, you can't on TV, YouTube and stuff. A lot of times you can speed up, but I'm like, this is like so boring to me, and it shuts my brain down. So a lot of times when I'm watching TV, I just fall asleep. When I read, sometimes I do fall asleep if it's late, but most of the time I'm like, it actually ignites my brain to where like I have a hard time sleeping if it's a business book. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I explain it. I was like, photos are more like reading the book, where video is like watching the movie.
Mm.
Both are great a lot of times, but reading the book, you get to put your story in that. And there's nothing quite like having no devices on, including a TV, and flipping through something that's tangible.
Mm.
So that's why I do what I do versus video. I think having a videographer is a great idea.
Sure.
But when it comes down to it, we're very different. It's in the same world. You can actually shoot video on this camera that I'm going to be using and stuff like that, but I only do photography for this reason, and they do video for that reason. And when it comes down to it, it's like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the experience is totally different. And for a photographer, I want to deliver it in a book, because I want you to slow down and remember what it was like for you on your day.
Wow. Yeah, that is vastly different from how I've handled it in the past, but it does make it makes so much more sense, because I mean, if we really think about it, people are always concerned with, oh well, why would I want this in a few years? But like, okay, if you watched the video that you had like taken in like the 90s, like on today's TV, it looks terrible. And I'm not saying that that your wedding videos are going to necessarily be the same way in a couple of years. But technology changes, and we have 4K TVs now. There's 8K TVs out there, so we might be at a point where like you literally can just virtually jump into a screen, and that might be the only way to experience those things. But the cool thing about photos is they're kind of like vinyl records. People still bring them back. They love them. It's for the feel. It's for the moment. It's like this thing that, okay, I have multiple uses. I can't print my video. Can't put it up on my walls. I can't do anything else with it, but I can do that with photos. And then to have this like book that it's not for me. It's for like, okay, 30 years from now, what if I'm not here? What if I don't make it, if something happens, I get hit by a car and my partner has no other way? Well, now they have this tangible thing. Or what if my kids want to teach, or, they want to teach their kids how their parents met, and they have this book. And so it is this generational thing that I think is it's beautiful, really. And that's kind of been my stance on it. It's like, yeah, video's great. And I used to make really good videos, but there is just this magic in the book. Hey, if you like this content and you want to see more of it, help me help you. YouTube loves to see likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions to the channel. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. If you haven't shared it to your friends, go ahead and do that so we get more photographers like that. And if you just like this content, leave me a comment. Thanks so much.
The way it ignites your brain blows my mind, because I remember my grandpa is passed now, but towards the end of his life, he had Alzheimer's. And he was the guy, whenever we were on a trip, he lived in Northern California. I lived in Southern California. But when we saw each other, a lot of times it was in Yosemite, or him and I would go fishing once a year and fish for salmon. I loved the time I got to spend with him, because he was very good at slowing down. Like, it was before a lot of these, devices with phones that we can just access everything with and stuff like that. But he would be like, oh, there's a rest stop, and we'd pull over, and he would eat an entire watermelon and want to just talk about like anything. Like, he was so good at going slow. Sometimes, like later in life, I got pretty impatient. Was just like, can we just go? But when it came down to it, he had kind of like lost it, right? Like he couldn't fully remember who I was sometimes. But my aunt was his caretaker, and she would surround him with photos, because he loved having photos. So there was like albums, and then there was just loose prints everywhere, and he'd be like, hey, come here. And sometimes he wouldn't even remember my name. And I would go over there, and he'd be like, let me show you this photo. When he'd pick up this photo from like before I was born, he would start explaining it as if it was like yesterday. And my aunt called it like Rain Man, because it was so, everything was true about it. He was like, this was at the ranch down by the thing, and all the facts were there. And he's like, remember this horse, and my aunt would be like, well, he wasn't there, he wasn't alive then, dad and stuff like that. And he'd give her this look, and then he'd start explaining it again. So he would have all these photos around him, but it was like he would come back to life as if he was in that photo, and he remember everything about it, but he couldn't even remember his grandson's name. It
Hmm.
was wild how it sparks something different in your head.
Yeah.
So I just love the concept of photos. And then I'm like, now we can do it in an album, where it's like that's their story in an actual book. It's like, here's your story, here's the
Yeah.
book about you. I just absolutely love that.
Yeah, it's there's a quote on my website that's like, it's I actually learned it from Coke, believe it or not, but it says we don't remember days, we remember moments. And that's why
Mm,
that really for me, that's like why I'm a photographer. But the way
mm,
you just explained it also connects because I feel like photos, much more than video, jumpstart your actual. That's I think how your brain actually remembers things. It's like it's got a moment,
mm.
it's got an image attached to it inside of there. It pulls that information, and then it can like kind of fill in the story afterwards.
Yeah.
And our books that we design, we're not being too busy with them. There's not 1,000,005 pictures on them. We are allowing the brain to jump back in the way it naturally thinks,
That's right.
versus kind of a edited, replayed story inside of a video. And
Yeah,
again,
totally.
there's no bad in having video.
Exactly.
I connect so much on a deeper level with a photo. It's interesting. So, okay, we know for a fact Kiss books, like it's a high quality book, which means you're not selling it for cheap. How do you address coming up with like, this is where my album's starting from, and why would someone jump up to, let's say, like I've got like a $4,000 album in mind. Why would they jump up to something like that?
Yeah, I don't always. It is about timing when it comes down to it, and understanding what you're selling isn't as much about what you think it's worth
Hmm.
as much as what they believe that they're worth, right?
Hmm.
Because when you look at like high end watches and cars, there's a lot less of them than there is these like mass produced vehicles, like Honda versus like Ferrari. It's very very different, right? Because there's only so many people that believe that they're worth that level, and do have the money to invest in something like a high-end vehicle or watch or something like that. And so and people that believe that they're worth it, they like that kind of like, oh, this was custom made for me. And so that's the market that Kiss wanted to go into, because it's actually like on a business, like if you look at a bell curve, it's not the best place to be, but I'm in love with it. And it's kind of like shooting 10 weddings versus shooting 50 weddings.
Hmm.
Most people would say I want to shoot 10 weddings that I choose at like with my people, than 50 that are like, I'm not sure I can remember half of their names if I
Hmm.
shoot that.
Yeah.
Some people want to shoot the 50 because they're like, I could probably make more money doing that. I understand that. For us, we were more in the boat of like, maybe we're not going to be like the Amazon of albums, and it's never going to be like this like 9-figure company or whatever. But I wanted to be so adamant about people that were willing to invest in themselves. So for a photographer to jump from like a press, we even launched press printed like a couple years ago now,
Yeah.
because I wanted them to be like, I want you to have access to Kiss and all the education that we give you, but you have to be a client in order to do that. So if you come in at press printed, I'm going to show you how to evolve your company to a place where you're serving them with that like $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 album. You don't start there though. I mean, some people have like all the confidence in the world, and if there's one thing I wish I could like teach or just bottle up and be like, here, have this. This is called liquid courage, and we
Yeah.
call alcohol that, but this is actual like gives you everything you need to like believe that you're worth this stuff. I wish I could teach confidence more, but when it comes down to it, once you start doing it, it does become stacking. So why would you move from like a lower end, maybe like a press printed book, to like a professional level book, like Kiss or Red Tree? Kiss and Red Tree are these like more boutique, higher end, hand done albums.
Yeah.
The reason to do that is when you get to a place where you're really like, what I do for a living is, I document your wedding, and I use a camera to do that. And what it matters to me that it is in this book that, and you fill in the blank for that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just way easier to sell something that you're in love with. It's like weird how it works, but we can just read it when somebody's like not into what they're selling to us, and it just makes the experience like not that great. And I know kind of how you do it, and other people as well, where they're like, here's this book and here's a Kiss book.
Yeah.
You decide. You decide. And they're like, well, I want this book, but like this one seems more affordable. Like, let's see what our budget is. So to make that move really is, and we cover the span. We're just known as this like higher end album company because it's like that is what that's where we want to be as photographers as well.
Yeah.
Like I want to shoot weddings for, $10,000 or more, and I want to serve them with a fill in the blank album and all those types of things. But to make that step, I really do believe that it's like, come check out what Kiss has got going on. I'll show you some of our affordable books, and then I'll show you how to stair step to where you do have that like 10 by 10 leather, like 40 spread album that you're confident with. When you deliver their design, you're like, I know when I hand this to you, you're going to say thank you, because I've done it at the 8x8 level
Yeah.
and the lid and the press printed book. And then you just slowly stair step. One of my favorite ways of even just raising your prices is for the next 2-3 months, if you have consultations coming up, raise your prices by $300. Once you've booked 3 weddings, raise them $300 again. In 12 weddings from now, your prices have gone up, in the thousands of dollars range. When I'm talking about Millers or even Red Tree, and Red Tree is like the closest to what we do. And I
Yeah.
know Josh, like the owner of Red Tree, and I know people, and I've met with the owners of Millers and WHEC. We've seen each other's labs and all these things. I try and invest in that so that I'm like, we're serving this community. I'm not trying to take people from their lab. What I'm trying to do is to get it to where more people are served better with albums, because statistics say I don't need to take anybody from another lab. What we need as a whole, we need to serve in a better way to make it more approachable to where you feel confident as a photographer serving them. So let's work on that versus like, I'm trying to take, I want this many new clients and I need to take them. Because even with weddings, there was 2 point, 2.6 something million weddings this year in the US alone.
Yeah.
There's more than enough to go around. I know there's
Yeah.
not a few 100,000 photographers, and then less than that are full time. So do the math. There's plenty of work to go around, but it feels saturated. And I totally understand that. The difference is we're not educating them. We're not even educating our clients as well as we can. They're getting all their information from like the Knot or from these outsiders that are like not always doing photographers the best, justice in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm really trying to not like take clients, take photographers from some of the lab. I'm like, who are you using? They're like, so and so. I'm like, great. I know a little bit about their product. Let me tell you how to sell that. It's not about.
Yeah.
It's like if you're serving with albums, I'm just showing you how to serve more of your clients with albums. Then if you're ever ready, you can of course come over to Kiss, and I'll welcome you with open arms. But that is not what I'm trying to find. The people that are afraid of selling albums, and that's what I run into regularly. It's like, um, do you currently serve your clients with albums? And photographers, most of them are like, no. And I'm like, okay, how many weddings do you shoot? And they're like 10. I was like, what if I could show you how to make an extra $10,000 this year? Would that make a difference for you? And they're
Mm.
like, yeah. And I was like, that's a good goal. I have good, better, best.
Yeah.
Good is like pretty simple for me to get. Better is like, okay, like I would be really stoked with that. Best is like big, hairy, audacious goal, kind of like, but a lot of my clients that I show how to do this, they hit their best goals, but they're afraid of it. So I just put good in there. And so I say, why are you not serving with albums? And they're like, well, my clients don't want them. I was like, okay, why do you think that? I get it. I just want to get to know it a little bit more. Well, I have it in a la carte. And they
Mm.
don't buy it. They're like, okay, why else do you think they don't want it? And it's like, I think they're just expensive. They could probably get one from like fill in the blank consumer name
Yeah.
and just do it themselves. And I was like, okay, why else would you not sell albums? They're like, I just feel salesy. I'm not a good salesperson. I'm a creative. I don't like to do sales. I was like, cool. I'm going to take that as your truth, and I'm going to put it right here. It is true because it's your truth. Would you be willing to open up with me and just consider other options? Just consider.
Yeah.
Like, what if I could show you that it's not about sales? You could just serve your clients differently. What if what you're currently doing is actually a disservice? Would that offend you? And I'm okay. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just saying, what if you're not serving them as good as you could? Would you be okay with that? And they're like, no. And I was like, okay. What if your clients could afford it? Is that even an option?
Yeah.
They can't. They don't buy them. And I was like, okay, what if we just did it a different way? And then I start to show them the system. And I'm like, when I wrote the book, The Stack, it was like, it was like, it had so much sales. The word sales was in this book all over the place because that's ultimately what we're doing.
Yeah.
But if you're not good at sales, how'd you sell yourself 20 times to these people that hired you? You're still selling your
Right.
photography, you know? Well, no, like that's what they're hiring me for. They're not hiring me for an album. I was like, okay, but you still are pretty good at sales. How many people came in to book a wedding? Usually they're like, when I get them in the door, I book them. I'm like, well, you're good at sales then. We can call it whatever you want. You know,
Yeah.
that doesn't bother me. Sales just sounds slimy. And I'm like, okay, what if we could just serve them? And
Mm.
what if we serve better? And so I almost took the word sales completely out of the book. It's in there a couple of times,
Yeah.
but I'm like, we need to write it. And every time it says sales, we need to show serving, because I believe that we're serving our clients better by doing this. Because if you go back to that story, what if they're 6 years in and things didn't go that well? And
Yeah.
they may not even text you and say, "Hey, can I get a link to the images so I can post?" They may or may not do that. They may not care to look at those photos. But if they've committed to sit down on the couch and flip through their album as a tradition in their life, one of them may have the courage to still do that. And you literally could make an impact on the relationship that you would not have if you didn't serve them better. How do you feel about that? And it starts to feel kind of like your guts kind of like stirring. You're like, what do I do for a living? Like, I'm in love with photographing these weddings. I know what that's like. I've been in those shoes.
Mm.
The first time I shot a wedding, I was like, I don't really want to shoot weddings. I want to photograph like people jumping off mountains and like doing all these like extreme sports, because I don't want to do it, but I want to be around it. They're the ones that get hurt. That's what I wanted to do. And then I went and shot a wedding. I instantly fell in love with it because I was like, holy smokes, when you're like documenting it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool that I get to be a part of this.
Yeah. It's a
What
lot
do
of
you really want
trust.
to do? It is. It's so much. It's intimate. And I was like, this is unreal that we get to do this. And so I was like, I want to do whatever I can to serve them the best of my ability. And so even if I have to learn how to do sales because I'm afraid of it, then I will learn how to do that. And that's what I did. I just said, what if it's not sales? What if we're just serving them?
Yeah. And your
Because
method of
I delivered
sales.
so many albums I delivered. And when I started putting it in their laps, they would say thank you after spending all kinds of different levels of money, right? There was times where it
Yeah.
was like a few $100s, you know, they upgraded, and they're like, the biggest album sale I ever did was $29,000. I shot weddings at the end of my career for $25,000. A whole crew would show up. It's very high end. I only shot 5 a year. I had already started Kiss, but they, you know, there was a divorce. So there was, you know, 3 sets of parent albums, and they ordered 3 volumes. They were all 12 by 12s. It was crazy. They flew us down to hand deliver these books down to New Orleans. And when I gave them the book, they had given us $29,000. They're like, thank you so much. This is unbelievable. I was like, I don't know that it's worth 29 grand for all this stuff on top of what you already paid me. You know, like, it was just blowing my mind, but they knew they were worth it, and they knew what was that those books were about. And I'm like, man, this is worth us fighting for, you know?
Yeah. That's kind of what I love about the way you teach in general. You know, you as a like in the book all the way going through it, you literally say like it's more about serving. You're just presenting them with options. You're not saying, hey, you have to buy this one or you have to go with this nice one. You just say, this is where most people land. I think that's highlighted about 50 times in your book, at least in my copy it is.
Yep.
You know, this is where most people
Literally.
land, and this is the option you have. You don't have to go here. You could go less or you can go more, but I want to make sure that you're leaving with like this story that you want specifically told the way you want it told as you leave. And I think
Yeah.
there's magic in that. You know, it's not a pressure thing. It's just an options thing.
Yeah, I do that multiple times throughout the process. My favorite moment, though, is when, like, as a photographer, I photographed the wedding. I've done the design. And what's in their package is like 20 pages, and what I did was like 80 pages, like I typically did.
Mm-hmm.
And I let them live with it for a while I edited the rest of the images. But there's this moment where I turn the calculator on, and it shows them now what the album is, you know, would cost them, minus the like credit that they have, minus the discount, and it's still like a decent sized number at like 80 pages, right? That's a big upgrade. And I put it always in like in the 10 by 10 or the 12 by 12, depending on where I was at in my career. So I would just say something as simple as this. And it was not salesy. It wasn't a tactic. I was literally like, I was okay with whatever they ended up going with at this point. I would say, this is what your album would end up being if you bought it the exact way it is. Now we have the rest of the images so we can make changes. And this is how changes work. You get 3 rounds of changes in the next 30 days. You still get a discount for the next 30 days. You know, here's the rules. You know, you can swap out photos, you can take out photos, but if you add photos, I'm probably going to have to add spreads because I'm designing a wedding album, not a yearbook. And then I would say, so I want you to have the album that you want, but I also understand budgets.
Hmm.
If this doesn't work for you, just let me know which photos you want me to remove, and I would just leave it at that. And like they live with it as their album, and I know because I could see it on on the software in Kiss's software. It tells you how many times they've watched it. They've seen it 100 times, and
Hmm.
they're like remove what? Like they're not going to remove images so many times. They're just like, okay, we want it this way. How can we make this happen? I don't have the money, you know. And I was like, okay, we can go down in size. We can pull images. We can pull spreads. You can make payments. One of my favorite ways of doing it is like, this is maybe we're 2 months in, right after their wedding.
Yeah.
So we have 10 months before your anniversary. Over the next 9 months, I'm going to allow you to make payments. And I'm not going to deliver the book, but I want you to have it before your 1 year anniversary, because I want you to set this, you know, thing in your life, this tradition in your life where you sit down each year, and year one is like the coolest one, because you're like, oh, this is going to be our tradition. And I would make it to where it made it to where they could get to it one way or the other, make payments, like how often you get paid or whatever. And I'm not Dave Ramsey. I love his system, and I've gone through it before and stuff like that. But it's not my job to be like, are you being financially smart? I'm not trying to take advantage of them or anything. I'm like, what do you want? I regularly left it in their court. You could see it in the book. It just says like, so what do you want to do? What size do you want? Those are the things to ask. You leave these questions where they're open-ended questions where you're getting feedback and you're understanding what they actually want. And when I would say like, and some people would be like, oh, it's just too expensive. I was like, cool, no problem at all. Just let me know what photos you want to remove. And they
Yeah.
would you could see them deflate. And I was like, I know you've lived with this long enough that this is your wedding and this is how you want it. So let's figure out a way for you to get this album, or at least some form of it, to where it's closer to the album that you want. Because what's in the package is a highlight reel. It's one of the things I say. One of the in the package is a highlight reel. It's like 20 pages. I can't tell your whole story. It was this beautiful day and all these things went into it. I would love for you to have closer to your full length story. So let's figure out how to do that, you know? And
Yeah.
when you're on the same page and you feel like you're on the same team, it doesn't feel salesy. They're like, we're headed towards the same goal. How can we make this happen? You know?
Yeah.
And then I had backyard weddings that were like, their whole budget for their whole wedding was $10,000, and I was charging $8,000 at the time. I was their budget, right? What blew my mind is I did things the same exact way. I would show them, here is your, you know, your 10 spreads is what's in your package, or 20 pages, and here's 80 pages, you know? And I
Yeah.
let them live with it. I did all the same stuff. And I knew, I mean, we photographed it in the backyard. We did all the things. And I was like, they don't have a big budget. But I'd be like, you know, this album's going to cost you $4,000. And they're just like, we're going to make it happen, you know? And I'm like, I'd be like, that's when I would be a little Dave Ramsey, like, are you guys going to be okay? Like, are you guys going to eat top ramen for the first year of your marriage or what? They
Yeah.
were so committed to it. I wanted to do anything I could to make it happen for them, because they're the ones that understood, hey, this is worth an investment for me, because of the way that I told them the album could serve them in the future, you know?
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite things to look at too. Because I mean, obviously, I'm not even showing up for less than $5,000 as a wedding photographer, and my
Yeah.
average client spend before I even talk about albums is $10,000. So when I'm looking at this, and I always get that like, oh, is this really a good spend for your money? I had to start thinking, it was like, I'm not spending it's not my money to spend, so that doesn't really matter. And then I have to look at the alternatives. What are you going to
Yeah.
spend that money on otherwise, and what matters to you?
Yep.
So like,
Yep.
am I worth, like, is what I provide now, or what this book would even provide, worth more than, like, let's say a PlayStation 5 or like McDonald's for 6 months, or, you know, wherever it is that they want to go. And every time I looked at it that way, I went, yeah, actually making that sacrifice would make sense, at least for me, if I was in their position. And so you do have to stop going like, okay, just because my bank account has this limit on it right now doesn't mean theirs does. And you have to let people put money into what's important to them. And your whole process inside the book, which, by the way, guys, like, I've read his book so many times. It's one of my favorite things to just kind of go through and just reread and look at all the notes that I've taken, which is a lot of notes. It's this process of just becoming this trusted advisor and friend versus anything else. So, you know, it really does fit in with the whole mantra for the way I teach is serve first, sell later, you know, and that applies across everything we do here. But with albums, it's like, man, if I could just give you what you want and then let you decide, and then I can back away, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Whatever you want
So
is
many
what
album
matters.
meetings that I had, it was like we're deep into the relationship. I've delivered the experience and then some that I said I would. We're buddies at this point, you know? And so we're like laughing and making, you know, changes and getting everything exactly the way they want it. They're like so happy to spend the money with us. And I see some of the questions that are coming in, like, do you charge interest? And some of the comments that were made about, like, you know, I'm adding that. Like, all this stuff is for you to add to your, like, to your business, because the way that I see life is like what you currently have is like possibly you have a company that serves and you do X amount of weddings, and you know what, you know, I know I'm going to deliver images, I'm going to use this software, I edit like this, or I use this editing company, all the things. What you know is what your current reality is.
Hmm.
If you want to like level up, you could raise prices, right? That's
Yep.
one way to make more money. You could photograph more weddings. That's another way to make more money, right? You could photograph minis, and you could do, there's a lot of things that we can do to add to our company. You could add albums, and then it becomes a part of what you do. Maybe you're the person that does weddings, and then in the other seasons you do minis, or you add boudoir to your lineup because it just pairs really well with weddings. There's a lot of things that we can do to grow our business. The thing about albums is the impact changes so much,
Yeah.
because you can photograph more weddings and you still have impact because you're impacting more people. But most entrepreneurs understand that what we're trying to do is actually less for more money. We're trying
Yeah.
to do less things for more money. And I could show you how to photograph 10 weddings a year and likely retire with a very decent savings and things like that in about 15 years. It's not, I did weddings for 15 years and I did 500. You don't have to do that. You can do it for a lot less. You would be photographing families. You'd be doing albums really well and stuff like that. You wouldn't necessarily be living on the hill and flying private, but it still is, it's better than what most people are currently doing, because 78% of wedding photographers are photographing weddings for under $2,000. 500,000 weddings a year, 500,000. Think about that number. Think about 500,000 weddings that happen in a year. That's a lot.
Yeah.
500,000 of them are photographed between $0 and $500. That's what they're spending on photography.
Hmm.
So it does not shock me that every 3 years, 85% of our industry is turning over. It doesn't shock me.
Yeah.
It does make me sad. And at first it shocked me, but all these statistics point to this thing to where it's like we're starving artists. So that's my new goal, is like, I want to take photographers from being starving artists to successful. Let me show you how to do it just by adding albums. Now, just adding albums is not this small thing, but once you do it, you can automate so much of it that you're not doing more work. You're doing maybe a tiny bit more work to make sometimes double what you made on the wedding when you just photographed it and gave them the images. That's like my heart, and the impact is so powerful.
Yeah.
I think it's more powerful than photographing more weddings and not serving them with an album. I happen to own an album company. I totally understand that that could come across as salesy.
Yeah.
Tell me you use Red and I'll tell you how to sell albums. It does not bother me.
Yeah.
I'm good, because I know I want to make an impact more than I'm like, you have to use Kiss isn't the magic. The magic, you're actually the magic. If I can show you how to create an experience and you can make it magical, you're going to have a line out your door and you get to charge kind of like what you want at some point, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I love. Somebody said, do you charge interest on payments? I did not. As long as they stayed in the what they said they would. I did have a contract that would say, like, if you don't pay, you don't get the album until it's paid in full, and if you miss up to this point, it's going to start charging you interest. But I really didn't have to run into that
Yeah.
because they wanted it so bad. Like, when people start showing up late for work, it's because they've lost interest in the purpose of the company. It's not because they've become lazy people. That's what we think. Like, I just can't find the right people. If they were headed to a ski trip and they loved skiing, they would not be late for the flight. They'd be early. Their skis would be waxed. They'd be good to go. They've lost interest in it. When it comes to you serving and the experience that you deliver, you're probably doing that good enough. They're going to be like, they're going to hold to that. They're not going to let you down. It's a lot easier to like miss a payment on a credit card than it is somebody that like photographed your wedding that's holding your album. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
like I said, I got lots of weddings. I didn't chase money. I really didn't, because
Yeah.
we were friends. Like, we were trusted, and I was let into this intimate day to where I didn't have to charge interest, and I was good with it because I had made my money. This was additional money that was going to the bottom line, but I was good. And what was nice about payments was even when I shot 50 weddings, there was times where it was like I'd have 9 one month and then just a few other months, I had regular payments coming in like I was getting a paycheck. And I wasn't
Yeah.
always great with where I was like, if I don't book this wedding, I got to pay for that other album. I'd been in shoes like in seats like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, regular payments was like the coolest thing I ever turned on, because I was like, I got 5 people on payments. I'm making, $1,200 a month just in payments every month. And I absolutely loved that. And then I got my stuff figured out with finances and stuff like that. But I'm telling you, just by adding albums again, and I've made it simple. I haven't made it easy. It's not easy to add albums. It takes some work. Once you do it, it is easy, and you fall in love with it and you get more confident. And all of a sudden you're like, there's no way I ever thought I'd be doing this. But you don't have to trust me on that. I can just show you how to do it. And then when you do it, I'm not going to say I told you so. I'm going to say like, welcome to like impact. Welcome to impacting your clients in a way that I never thought I could and
Yeah.
get to.
I'll say like you don't ever know how valuable what you do as a photographer is until you hand that first album to your client in front of you and you just see them, they just light up their eyes. They start crying. I've seen guys that like showed no emotion during the wedding day. All of a sudden they have this in their hand and they just start crying in front of you and you go, okay, maybe what I do is worth whatever it is that I'm charging in the first place, and that book has to be worth that. I'm telling you, if you really want to understand how to sell your albums, start delivering those things in person, at least a couple of them or whatever ones you can, because you're going to see that reaction and go, I delivered a lot more than photos. I tell people this all the time. I don't sell photos. I sell memories. It's like a memory insurance service that I sell. And when you can start connecting your photos to just more than, oh, this is a cool picture, to, oh, I remember the first time I saw my wife in her wedding dress, or the first time her dad saw her there, and I can just see the emotion, and now he's not around, or whatever. When you can start connecting things to that, then it's like this just crazy scale of value that you deliver, and then to give it back to them in a physical form. You got to at least try it once. I mean, if nothing else, experiment. And Shaun's, I mean, like you said, doesn't care which album company you go to. He's got a really cool course that's part of KISS called the Album Accelerator, and you can hear his heart here. It's more about just having this option for you to make more money. If you want someone who really wants you to do better and do better for your clients, Shaun's your guy.
Yeah.
And again, read his book. His book is amazing. I actually do want to talk a little bit about the stack you have behind you. So yeah. I feel like we should probably mention how we're even showing off these albums. I'd like to know how you would show this off in person, and then maybe like how you would show it over Zoom, because most of my clients at this point are meeting over Zoom.
Yeah. Brett said, my stack makes his look insufficient. And when it comes down to it, this is what I call the ideal ultimate stack. This is everything. So the top one is an 8x8 linen thin page. The way that I do this, like sharpen your pencils real quick, because I'm going to walk you through what the ultimate stack is. And I'm going to show you what order to order these in. Again, it's just like I would order this book first, an 8x8 linen thin page book. Again, whatever company you use, something in this ballpark. It's affordable. It's something you can put in every single one of the packages. What I would put in your first one, if you can only order one book, I would put a wedding in this one. The second book that I would order is the 10x10. And then the third book that I would order would be another 8x8. And I would put an engagement book in the other 8x8 that you have. You notice I have two 8x8s, and then everything else I just have one of. So I do an engagement in the top one, and then a wedding. So 8x8, 8x8, 10x10, 12x12. It goes engagement, wedding, wedding, wedding. Now the engagement is 10 to 15 spreads, so 20 to 25, 26 pages, something like that. And I would just do engagements. And there's a reason for that I'll come back to. Then the 8x8 wedding, I would do that as the same wedding as the 12x12, same exact wedding. Not because you don't have enough work, more so that you can open up both of those and show them the difference between an 8x8 and a 12x12. And when you sew them side by side with the same exact spread open, they're like, holy smokes, that 12x12 is gorgeous. Like it pops off the page. It's so much bigger. So you show them that because of that. So I would go 8x8 engagement book, 8x8 wedding album, thinner thick page for the 8x8. And then when you move to the 10x10, that's a different wedding. I would do that 10x10 as maybe like 15 spreads, like 30 pages. And I would not go more than that. Like, why, Shaun? Don't you want to show them tons of stuff? Here's the deal. By the time they get to the consultation, whether it's Zoom or in person, they've looked at your work. You're a good enough photographer, or they would not have called you. They can see you on social media. They can see you on your website. They know you're a good enough photographer. They're interviewing you to see if they want you at their wedding or not, and see if their budget can work out. And so the 10 by 10, again, I don't want them. This is actually how I start the meeting, whether it's Zoom or in person. I always had the album, not always, when I was doing the best, that I felt like my business was really crushing, was when, hey, I want to get to know you before we talk about like everything that's in the package. Like, I'm
Mm.
not here to sell you. I
Yeah.
want to get to know you. How did you meet? What does a typical date night look like? What are you excited about for your wedding? I would ask them questions, and I'm just doing research to understand how I want to speak to them so I can love them really well during this, and see if I want to work with them as well. And like the best part of my career, I was like, I don't need this wedding, but if it's one of my ideal clients, then I will hire them like they're hiring me,
Yeah.
And so the 12 by 12 is like I said, it's the same as the 8 by 8 album, but I would have a few more spreads in the 12 by 12 just to show a little bit more like this is closer to a highlight reel. This is more like a full length story. So there's so much that goes into it, but I would get to know them first. And then I'd be like, oh, do you want to check out one of the books? And if you're looking at the most popular package and you point right to the most popular package, which is usually the second from the top, that you look at that package, it has 10 hours of coverage, 2 photographers, an engagement book. It has this album in it right here. And then I pull the engagement book off, and I'd say like it has this book in it right there. It's an 8 by 8 linen thin page album, and it's 7,500 for that package. It's like second to the top, or whatever your price is, 5,500. You can say like this one's an engagement book because this book, an 8 by 8 linen thin page, is great as an engagement book or a parent album. You're just dropping little seeds that you're going to come back to later. Because then when you photograph the engagement session, they don't have an engagement book in their package, but you send them a design of an engagement of photos with them in it. And one of the things you're going to want to get to know is what type of music that they like. So you can bolt on a song that they love that goes with it. I just get the chills because it's not that this is so good. It's like, I know the feelings they're going to feel.
Yeah.
When I flip through a slideshow, we just had our family photographed and stuff like that. When they put music to it and they know it's my music, I'm like, I get so much more emotional. I love it. But if they see photos of themselves in in the design, it's way different than being like, you need this in your package, you need this. And these are like strangers. Whenever they
Mm.
look at a book of somebody else, they're just comparing it to what they think their wedding or their engagement session is going to look like. That's what we do. We just compare. When you show them photos of themselves, they first judge themselves, but then they start to hopefully see that relationship and what matters. So I pull this book out first and just show them a few engagement photos, talk to them about what they could have at their wedding. Like, oh, you can actually sign in this book, and it's so fun seeing your guests like find their favorite photo and sign in next to it instead of having like a traditional old school kind of a sign in book. A lot of people use this, and then you have it
Mm.
kind of forever. It's like a yearbook for your wedding, and it's
Yeah.
so fun. And then I would show them the 10 by 10. I could say like, here's the 10 by 10. I pull the 10 by 10 out and I'd say like, this is what most of my clients end up wanting. There's no lie about that,
Right.
because most people, the middle, like we know that, like McDonald's didn't sell. They were one of the first ones to do double doubles, right? Like, so they didn't sell any doubles until somebody in their marketing department said, we need to sell a triple so that people will buy the double. And then they started selling so much more doubles. The most sold drink at Starbucks is the Grande. Why? Because it's the middle. We don't want to
Mm.
be like this gluttonous venti, and tall just doesn't do the tricks. Not enough caffeine. There's so much that goes into that. So I would give them a 10 by 10. I'd say like, this is where most of my clients end up wanting to be. It's a great size album for a wedding. It's not super big gap to upgrade to this. When you book the package, it comes just like it is. That package right there costs that much money. From that moment up until 30 days after we start doing changes on your album, you get a discount on any album upgrade that you do. I gave them 30%. That's what I did. And that's what my MSRP that I suggest for KISS is. The 10 by 10 is the most popular album, literally. Like, I could have started KISS and only done 10 by 10s and we would have been fine. The amount of 10 go out the door. So
Yeah.
we have 4 size books, right? 4 by 8 by 10 by 12 by. Half of what we do are 10 bys, and it's divided across the 3, what the other ones are. That's just how it works, and that's how it is studying a lot of other companies as well. So I would show them the 10 by 10 and be like, this is what a lot of my clients end up wanting, because it's a great size wedding album. Now, if your parents want to copy, that 8 by 8 is great. And some people even do their engagement book as an 8 by 8, because if you have like 400 guests or something, you need more space for them to sign in. Either go larger with more pages or go larger with like the album itself. So that's kind of like how I walk them through the stack. I don't even show them the 12 by 12 because what I don't want them to say is, let's say I put a 12 by 12. It has a cameo. It has a custom emboss. It has a box. It's gorgeous sitting over there. That's my showroom. Like when you're in a car sales place, there's the showroom car, right? And it's the loaded version of what you actually came to test drive. That's what this is doing. It's a 12 by 12. But if they ever say like, how much is that book? You're like, oh, it's pictures of somebody else. It's not as valuable to you as it's going to be when it's your photos. So I try to avoid those types of things, but I did have an answer for kind of anything that I needed to when it came to those things. But I would just walk them through a few of those things and be like, what are you thinking? A lot of my clients end up in this package right here. What do you think works for you? Let's walk through a little bit of things. And that's kind of how I'd walk them through the stack.
Yeah, that was amazing, Shaun. That was you just gave a whole mini course to everyone in here. I mean, that's really close to. I mean, that's what I do. I don't do engagement books just because I get overwhelmed with how many things I'm doing at once. But
Yeah.
I do. I did them for a little while, especially during COVID. Like that was a big like. Okay, we're saving it because I had a lot of weddings kind of moving over from year to year, and that was kind of how I stayed afloat, essentially doing it. And it was fun. I mean, it was fun designing those books and be like, hey, let's see them at the wedding, and I get to walk in and I see my work there, and it was a good time. But man, that whole like the whole sales process there. I mean, you could see how somebody would like see this and go, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go with the book I want to have. We do have one question here that I want to make sure we answer. Brielle's asking, how would you do this for like children and maternity portraits and not weddings?
I've been studying this a lot. We're going to be doing a lot more portrait work coming out, portrait education and stuff, because we're currently doing about 80% of what we do is weddings still. And we do a lot of portrait work, but it's only 20% of what we do. And there's so much work to be done out there for boudoir families. I have a senior photographer that's in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. And I know this because we hired him for my son's senior photos, and there wasn't even a Marriott in his town. I was like, I'm going to stay at the town next door because I'm a Marriott person, but I'll be
Same.
over there in time and everything. And they're in the middle of nowhere, and he orders 100 albums plus a year from me. And he's ordering thick pages, doing all this stuff for senior and high school people. It's wild. But the way that he does it is very similar. The stack is just basically take the 12 by 12 out to start. And instead of the 8 by 8 being the top, it's another 8 by 8 or a 4 by 4. If it's families, babies, families and boudoir look fine in this little kiss. The 4 by 4, it's like the cutest little album on the planet. I just don't sell it. I don't sell it as a wedding album. I gift it as a wedding album. But I'll talk to you about that in just a second. But for families, I just make the top book a press printed instead, or the top two books we press printed because they are a little bit more affordable. And then I walk them through the difference of the printing. Like, this is a great book. Consumers can actually get this, but I'll design it, and it is a higher quality than what consumers can get. But what I really like to see my clients in is the professional printed, but this album's going to hold up. It still has guaranteed for life on it, just like the other ones do. So it works the same exact way. And we are going to be coming out with education with boudoir, with families. That senior photographer that I talked about, he's one of the ones that's going to be helping us with education. And then there's a guy that just, I was talking to you about it recently. He does college, just like high school, but he does college seniors. And he's just crushing it with albums. It works the same way. The best way to do it, though, is, and this is hard. So it was Brielle that asked. I know Brielle had one question. And the way you're asking questions, I love, but I could tell your heart is very like, you're empathetic. You're like, when they start talking about a budget, I start giving them all the discounts. When you said that, I was like, I know a little bit about you, Brielle, and I'm grateful that you're saying these things because it helps me serve you really well. You care a lot about your clients, and I absolutely love that. Serve them well. But the thing is, a lot of times they are not, and I learned this, from Ben, ultimately, Ben Hartley, was like, it's not whether or not you're worth it or the book is worth it. It's whether they feel like they're worth investing in themselves for that. And it was such a huge game changer for me. So, so fine art is basically very similar to, she just commented, like, do you have anyone doing fine art? I do. And that's typically the world that they're in, because there's fine art books that are printed on different types of paper type and stuff like that. Again, that's not what's selling these albums. It's the experience, and people don't buy what you do. They buy how you make them feel. And so how you're making them feel by calling it fine art and stuff like that is like, oh, that sounds like, expensive. That's what I want. The quality of a lot of these fine art books, it's like you print this on those big Epsons and stuff. The quality is nowhere near what some of these silver halide printers are. And that's like me getting kind of nerdy when
Yeah.
it comes down to, I have people selling linen, our fine linen, as an upgrade to leather. Why? Because that's what they believe. It
Hmm.
is less, and they know it costs them less, but they do it because it feels like a restoration hardware book. And
Hmm.
they're like, they have like a lot of this is restoration hardware. They have restoration hardware when they walk in. It's this whole thing, and so it fits better than some of these like standard leathers do. And so like, this is leather and this is the standard leather, but then they use our textured leathers, or like weathered and stuff like that, as the same price as their as our fine linen. They're
Hmm.
like, this is for grade. This is like similar to what restoration hardware, because it's all true, but it
Yeah.
doesn't cost them. It cracks me up. Their profit margin is so much better. But yeah, fine art is a way of selling it to them. Like, we've gone through all kinds of iterations of like, I'm a photojournalist, I'm a this. It all of a sudden just sounds more expensive. It's
Yeah.
like not. It's just what experience works for you and what language. That's where a marketer comes in and can do their job really well. Is like, what are the words that are going to sound good coming out of my mouth that connect with you? That's what a good marketer does. That's what fine art is. It's a beautiful book. Don't get me wrong. That's how I
Yeah.
sold books for the longest time. I had a fine art book. That's what I called it. It was rectangle because of who I was using at the time. It was one image on each side. Why? Because that's so artistic. Just one image. That's all you could pick. It's not any different. I could have designed it however I wanted to, but I sold it that way, and I sold so many of them just because it's felt high end, and I love it. It works, but ultimately, it's like, what do you want to do, and what do you want to serve with? That's likely what you're going to have the best chance of selling to these clients.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to the 4x4 because I said I was going to do that. So the 4x4, this works for weddings, this works for families as well, but I wouldn't do it as a gift for families. What I would do is I would hand deliver the book when I could. If not, I would, drop ship it. Like so many I think it's over 70% now of people drop ship from Kiss. And I'm totally for that. I do really like hand delivering, but not everybody can do that. It does take time. But let's say I hand delivered the book. I did all the things. I would actually, post on social media, them flipping through the book. And then a week later, I would drop this in the mail. You send it to them with a handwritten note that says, it was so great serving you on your wedding day, and I love the way this turned out. I really want you to be able to have your album on you always. That's talking them into putting it into their bag,
Hmm.
so that when they're now at the salon getting their hair done by the person that probably did their hair for their wedding, they're like, they did their hair and they probably left a lot of times. It's not unless you're really close to your hair person. But they're like, how was your wedding? They're like, actually, I have this. I've seen this happen. I've seen this out at a salon, and all of a sudden the salon shuts down and everybody's over there looking at what? Your work. Like, this thing was top 3 referrals for me.
Hmm.
Whenever somebody walked in the door and they had seen this, I'm like, let me just get the contract out. Let's just talk about what we're doing. But this got me so much, and I did it as a gift, but it got me so many referrals, and it just made it to where they always had their album on me, and they have their nice 10 by 10, 12 by 12 album at home on their coffee table. I don't want that in their handbag. This I want in their handbag. I don't care if this comes back absolutely trashed, because that means it's getting some life out there and people are
Yeah.
walking around with this. You can take this to Thanksgiving. If you're flying to Thanksgiving, you don't want to bring a 12 by 12. Some people will, but you could take this and be like, here's like, check out this little album that my photographer gave me. Nowadays, they're going to get this and be like, look what my photographer just sent me. And they take a picture of the tiniest book on the planet, and they're like, who's your photographer? You're just looking for reasons for them to talk about you, and that's what this is for.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I just learned something because the 4x4 album, I've always looked at it and been like, okay, my mom comes to mind. She always likes to have pictures that I've taken or whatever. So it's like, okay, she probably just she can fit this in her purse, she can carry it around. So I've been like, this is the parent album, so you can fit it in your purse going around. But now thinking about it, it's like, man, they could just carry this around and show off my work all the time. So guys, I'm going to say like, this is a master, that's like a master tip. It's absolutely amazing. But I know, Shaun, you have a very busy day. You're running so many things and you're teaching so many other photographers. I want to hit again. We can see you on Instagram at Shaun Austin. You have kiss.us for the albums themselves. And then inside of Kiss, you have something called the Album Accelerator, which is your, hey, here's how you sell albums course inside of it. And guys, obviously, if I have Shaun in the group, I recommend you work with Shaun. That's how this group works. He's obviously... man, just you can hear the heart when you speak about albums, and so I love you for it, man. It's just you see it, and it's great. Hey, if you're a wedding photographer and you like the resources that we talked about in this live, do me a favor, go in the link in the description and join our free group for wedding photographers, or just subscribe to this channel and see more content like this on the regular. Thanks so much.